And on social media, your name comes up.
So basically, I started acting. I was in elementary school, 12 years old.
I was grateful every day that I was on set. Every day on set is a good day, man.
There's a certain energy that you kind of just want to be around them.
We can talk about him in a second as well.
I'm not a sports guy. I don't even know how football is played.
Despite the fact that I left the show for my own reasons, and we can talk about that if you like.
So tell me, what's next for you? Well, I'm so excited today about my next guest, Justin Baldoni. Justin is an incredible human being, a deep soul, very talented, very ambitious. We have a lot of crossing lanes with a lot of friends and relationships that we have, and I've heard a lot about him over the years. And of course, I've met him a few times, and he just released this amazing book, Man Enough, which is just one of his many, many products and projects. I'd say more so projects than products. This guy is best known, I'd say, for Jane the Virgin, for his role in Jane the Virgin and his viral TED Talk. But he's an actor and a director and a producer, entrepreneur, and a change maker. His efforts are focused on creating powerful impact media and entertainment. Just his proposal alone to Emily is one of the most entertaining things. I think you can just Google the proposal and it's a viral. It seems like everything he makes goes viral. He has this really beautiful series called My Last Days that if you haven't seen it, do yourself a favor and check it out. So he founded Wayfarer Studios, which is independent production engine, producing and creating purpose-driven talent on a multi-platform film and television that elevates and speaks to the human spirit, which it definitely does. It once you see My Last Days, you'll know what that's all about. So he's co-founder of Wayfarer Foundation, which is a nonprofit that seeks to change the way communities see and respond to homeless, to unhoused populations. I love that even in that it's called unhoused population. He's not even labeled him as homeless. It's the unhoused. It's just a beautiful perspective. So in 2019, Baldoni co-founded Wayfarer Studios with Steve Sarowitz, and they're disrupting the typical studio model here. They're producing stories that are change agents, true agents for social change. He also directed his first feature project in 2020 as a director called Clouds, which it was Disney featured, and one of their first films that they went to streaming in that way, based on the book Fly a Little Higher by Laura Sobek. And so this film was acquired by Disney, becoming Disney's first ever narrative acquisition on its global streaming platform, which is so cool. In addition to Clouds, the studio also has already built out a robust genre-defying slate of products for spanning film, scripted TV, documentaries, digital platforms, and so much more. He made his director debut in March 2019 when he directed the film 5 Feet Apart for CBS. And that starred Cole Sprouse and Haley Richardson. And she's a cystic fibrosis patient who they fall in love, and they aren't physically allowed to come closer than because of the medical condition. The film grossed $91 million worldwide, making it CBS's third highest grossing film of all time. And it was nominated for several awards, including a People's Choice Awards for Drama Movie of 2019 and a Teen Choice Award for Choice Drama Movie. So as director, Justin is known to leave a lasting impression. So in 2012, he created and directed the CW's My Last Days, which is what I was telling you. You have to go see. It's an uplifting documentary series about people living and dying with terminal illnesses, but focusing on the living. The series is in its 5th season on CW and is recognized by the television agency Honors as one of the most powerful, impactful television shows of 2018 that inspired widespread social change. So there's a theme here about Justin, is his impact on change, and he's a change maker. Baldoni also co-founded Wayfair Entertainment 2013. It's a social impact production company with its digital and branding content and mission to create projects that benefit the world through this platform. He created the dinner conversation series, Man Enough, which dives into traditional masculinity conversation, focusing on topics like body image, relationships, fatherhood. And he's spoken all about his journey with masculinity in this viral TED Talk, which I mentioned to you. As well, across many college campuses all over America, Baldoni has followed up with his wildly popular TED Talk with a book, this one, that he wrote boldly and transparently. And it's very transparent. I highly recommend this book. It's a good read. It's a good listen because it's his voice. Man Enough, Undefining My Masculinity. Undefining My Masculinity, published by HarperCollins, and it's part of a 3-book deal. So right now he's also, as a complimentary book with his longtime collaborator, Jamie Heath, and also prominent masculinity expert, Liz Plank. So now those with that group, they launched the Man Enough podcast, which if you haven't checked it out, it's really touching. There's actually an episode with his dad on there that's just unreal. On this podcast, they engage in intimate, open conversations with high-profile guests, and they investigate how traditional structures and attitudes towards success and failure, fatherhood, body image, privilege, relationships, intimacy, and other issues, and how that holds back and often oppresses and negatively affects men, women, and humanity as a whole. So Shawn Mendes has been on there, Alok, Glennon Doyle, Eugene Durbis, and many more. So he's also, as is the founder and the chairman of the Wayfair Foundation. It's a nonprofit organization that's dedicated to transforming the way communities see and respond to homelessness, which is what I identified earlier in the unhoused, is how it's phrased. Each year, the Wayfair Foundation puts on one of Los Angeles' largest volunteer events, the Skid Row Carnival of Love, which provides connection, services, and resources to people who are experiencing homelessness in LA's Skid Row community. Over the past few years, over 6,000 volunteers have served over 15,000 guests, providing them access to hundreds of service partners. So Baldoni first came to worldwide fame through his role as Raphael on the CW's award-winning phenomenon, Jane the Virgin. And now he currently lives in Ojai with his wife and 2 children. So I'm so excited. I just want to give you a piece of all that because we're not going to talk about all this stuff. We're going to dive into, we only have a short time today, so we're going to dive into some issues of the heart right off the bat, rather than he's talked about all this stuff lots, and the books have been out for a few months. They're just releasing a paperback version and gearing a little bit more towards middle school, teenage boys, which is a high impact area. So enjoy. That was a mouthful, but worth it. If you don't know Justin, you will know him. Definitely check this book out and or gift it to somebody who wants to understand what it's like to be a man. And even for women to understand men, I feel like it's a powerful book. So thank you for tuning into The Grass is Greener. If you could subscribe on Apple iTunes and rate and review, I would really appreciate it. And then if you're watching this video on YouTube, please subscribe. Please share it with somebody who might benefit from the impact of our conversation today. I'm so excited to have him on. He'll be joining us soon. Also in the background is my Patreon members. And so if you want to join Patreon, you can be a part of some of my live tapings when it feels appropriate, when it feels like the right thing to do. And today did, and Justin was down with it. So stay tuned for my conversation with Justin Baldoni.
How are you?
It's been, it's been a long time since I've actually seen your physical face.
Well, I mean, we've only met a couple times also, right?
Yeah.
We've only really met a couple times, but yeah.
Yeah. I think we met at one time with Sarah. You know, we have a mutual acting friend. What's her last name? Shabo? Sarah? Do you know Sarah?
Sarah, what's Sarah?
Sarah, we met at a little cafe at the very first time. You were she was in my acting class with me.
Sarah Habel.
Yes, Sarah Habel. And you were at this little in the valley, this little cafe, and we had just finished. And that's the very first time I met you. It was maybe 10 years ago. It was super brief.
Oh, that was you?
That was me. Yeah.
I remember running into Sarah somewhere, and she was with a guy.
Yeah.
Oh wow, what a crazy small world.
That was, and then at Travis's, one of his fundraisers for Build On, or actually probably two of those.
Yeah.
And-
Was that the one where we did Greece?
Yeah, I think so. And then, and then at your place in Venice, and it's with my son, when you and Emily were in Venice, and I came to your place to like apologize to Emily of how our relationship ended. That was like that was my first real
the interaction with you. Yeah, I remember that.
And that was it was so beautiful, man. And I think I know my son, I was affected, and I know my son also. It was so impactful to see how you held the space for that, and just how gorgeous, and how, because it was a vulnerable, uncomfortable thing.
I was really impressed with you that day. I remember that. I remember because I think for anybody who's listening, obviously, so Paul dated my wife before I met her, before I knew her. That was the relationship before the one that we were in. And we met in Venice, and we were just I don't know, you were looking for an apartment or something, right? You were like looking to move. And I think you brought up, hey, love to chat. And you just started sharing. We invited you over. I think that's how it started. We invited you to come by.
Yeah.
But I just love that. I thought that was so manly of you.
Manly. Yeah.
To be willing to take account for your actions and be willing to apologize in front of also in front of her husband. And I was like, this guy's great. What a great guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. We all make mistakes. We're not perfect. We all screw up. It's about how we bounce back from those things. That's what matters. That's the true test of character.
That's right. Right. And I just, when I didn't have the communication tools at the time also to share what was going on inside, right, with Emily. And then just the way, but to be able to kind of get completion with you like that in front of my son, and it was a beautiful moment. And then of course I've heard about you from Travis and John Wineland, because John Wineland.
I love John. What a great guy.
Yeah, John, and obviously Claire, who you featured in My Last Days, which is just ripping and gripping.
She was like my little sister.
Yeah. And, we're getting right into it. I have done a whole intro before this where I share just about, so most people know so much about you. We don't have a lot of time. So I just want to
I know. Don't worry about it, man. Let's just do our thing. Don't worry about
it. You let me know when you got it. You let me know. Okay.
Matthew will jump in. My assistant, the way it's going to work is my assistant will reach out to Matthew if I have to jump, but let's just do our thing, man.
Okay.
We're here. We're finally here.
We're here. And dude, my heart, I've always had this love for you, and it's hard to explain, because I've, when you love someone and then you also, you see them so happy in a relationship, and love, and you talk about it in here, to be one of your chapters about is the sexy enough, and and loved enough, and the dad enough, and the way, it's such a brutal trap that we get caught in. Am I doing enough? It's such a hamster wheel of pain. And I love how you address it. But when you see somebody that you're with that you've been with in the past, and you see them so happy and so fulfilled and so loved and so nurtured, it actually helps heal the parts in you where you're where you know that you've fallen short, or that you weren't in the space to create that. So you've been it's been such a beautiful gift to see that. But then also knowing you're from Travis, hearing the things that you guys do together with Build On and with your Bahai faith. And I met your dad. Actually, I met you with your dad at a clothing drive at Travis's house once. uh, a clothing drive at Travis's house, and your dad showed up, and you guys hugged right there. And you talk, I know you talk about this amazing, the relationship you have with your dad. And I remember being, because my dad had just passed, and I remember watching
Oh man.
your interaction with your dad, and it welled me up in the moment. I was just like, man, it was so tender and so vulnerable and joyful. And I was just like, it made me so like miss my dad in that moment.
Oh man. Yeah. That's something I think about a lot is, in the Baha'i faith, we're told to meditate on our death. And as that informs the way we live. So it's something I think about a lot is the death of my own parents. And then there's times when I'm with them and I'm like just being a little asshole because of the little Justin is screaming to be seen or heard or held or something. But so it's always this battle between like, I know I have them now, I know I won't one day, like, let me just soak it up. It's the same battle I have with my children, which is like they're going to be they're going to be grown soon. I should just stick around at bedtime a little bit longer. What do I really need to rush away for? But the thing with my dad is it's been super healing over the last 5, 6, 7 years, and we're still working on it. But he's so open and present and willing to do the work and willing to hear. And like you, willing to apologize in ways where maybe he fell short, which is where I learned to apologize for ways that I fall short. So he's a very special man.
Yeah, that he is. And when you said the Baha'i faith, that what that meditating on death sounds like the Stoic philosophy too, because there's a big Stoic approach that's
There's
like
a lot of Stoicism's amazing. Yeah, but it's a little bit different than Stoicism. In the Baha'i faith, for anyone who doesn't know what the Baha'i faith is, the Baha'i faith is essentially the most recent of the world religions, and the fundamental belief is that we're all one, and that religion is one. So religions are not competing with each other. That would be like your kindergarten teacher competing with your 5th grade teacher. So the idea of progressive revelation is that from the beginning of time, God's covenant with man is that he would never leave man alone. She loves us. God is an unknowable essence. It's not a guy in the sky with a beard judging us. How could we ever imagine in our minds a thing, a being, something that could create us? We can't. It's infinite. We're finite. Our walls, the brain wall stops that from happening, from understanding it. So really, it's just about oneness and the idea that throughout history, God has sent different messengers and teachers based on our capacity to understand the message. Just like our children learn something in 1st grade, and then they learn more in 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th. The teachers aren't wrong. They're all teaching and building on the same thing. And the purpose is to progress us towards unity, towards oneness. But the key idea in the faith is that this is not the end. This is the beginning. So this life is really the first life. The womb, there was our life in the womb. We're born into this world, and then this is the next womb. And that idea of meditating on death is to inform us of what we need to pack for where we're going next. It's a journey, right? Many people, when you go on a journey, I'm someone who does this. We're leaving. I'm going out of town. I'm going on a work trip. I'll wait till the night before to pack.
Me too.
We're like rushing. We're like just throwing all our shit in there. We're just like, how many pairs of underwear do I need? Like,
I know.
You just throw it all in. But we don't want to do that with life, because the Baha'i belief is that our purpose here is to develop as many spiritual qualities as we can. Just like in the womb, we were developing the physical qualities we needed for this material world, our arms, our legs, our eyes, our ears. If we don't have those things, in some ways, we're disabled. We can still enjoy life, but we don't have all of our attributes. In this lifetime, it's about our spiritual qualities, our spiritual attributes, and you cannot develop them in the next world. They're only for this world. That's where free will comes in. So it's about meditating on our life, on our death, and every day packing. Every day being conscious of like, okay, let me pack some truthfulness today. Let me pack some steadfastness today. Let me pack some love today. And you're just packing throughout the course of your life because you're going to need that bag one day. So that's kind of that's the difference between the Stoicism idea and the Baha'i
Yeah.
faith idea.
Yeah. And when you were saying about when you're tucking them in at night and like, where am I rushing to? Right. Like they're only these little kids for such a short amount of time. And we have a 3-month-old.
Yeah, I saw. Congratulations, man.
Yeah. Yeah. So always 18 and in Florida, like living on his own and doing all his things. And then we're starting
Crazy.
brand new again. And that feel like, when you're kissing them and saying goodnight to them is like we're always in such a rush. And so I love that focus to just take some time and to like, where are we in such a rush to? One of my teachers always used to say, like, where are you in such a hurry to go? Like to your death? Like where? Because that's where we're all going. So where are you in such a?
Yeah, I mean, time. I think we spend the first half of our lives trying to speed up time, and the second half trying to slow it down.
There you go. That is true.
I'm 38 now, and I'm pumping on the brakes. I'm pumping on the brakes hard. I'm like, okay, everything has been about the next thing, building. This patriarchal idea of what we have to be considered enough in this world. And I'm already looking around and being like, whoa, I got to slow this thing down. I don't have to be all of those things. What is enough, actually? And so at nighttime, that idea of there's actually it's funny. There's a Stoic saying. Ryan Holiday is an amazing author. He wrote a book on Stoicism. But there's a saying in Stoicism that's imagine that each night is the last night with your child.
That they won't wake up.
That they won't wake up in the next morning. And it's not to like have that grim idea that, oh my God, they won't wake up. But if it was that way, where would you be running off to that would be more important than being right where you are?
And that's when you shared that's exactly the book that it reminded me of. And I was like, that's very, very similar to that feeling. And it's so beautiful. It's such a beautiful. How old are your kids now?
4 and 6.
I love your videos of watching you like chasing them around and playing. So I asked God what we should talk about today. And this is the first time I've done this. Like I was on the
Yes, God. I love that.
and the answer was this, and we're already doing it, which is great. Family, focus, and fear. So family is like, how are you so, and the focus part is how do you focus on being so productive and get so much done and be there for your family? And then what are you afraid of? Those are like, that's, if we touch on those,
family, focus, and fear. That's interesting.
Family.
I thought God would say, me, dummy.
Right. We're gonna
like, God, what should we talk about today? God's like, me, you idiot.
Yeah.
We should talk about me. God, I created this. I created you. I created time. I created your podcast. Right.
That's right. Let's talk about, well, we are in a sense. I think that faith, obviously it's so important to you. Did you inherit your faith or did you choose it? Like, is this from your
both?
Yeah.
And that's what's confusing, and what I talk to a lot of especially young Baha'is about, is I inherited my faith. My parents chose it. My mom was Jewish. My dad was Catholic. My mom always asked why. Why does everyone else celebrate Christmas? Why? Who is Jesus? And she was never satisfied with the answer that the Jews gave her. No, he was a nice man. He's like, if he was a nice man, why doesn't make any sense? And my dad was Catholic, but really more of like every couple Sundays, head to confession kind of Catholic. And he met my mom, and my mom had become a Baha'i. He became a Baha'i. They had me. Now at 15, every Baha'i child gets to choose for themselves if they are going to become a Baha'i. It's kind of the age of the rite of passage. And one of the key principles in the Baha'i faith is the independent investigation of truth. So you can't just believe something because your parents believe it. You can't just believe something because, I was on a podcast today and Paul said this thing and I believe that. No, you have to research it for yourself. That's how truth is found. And so at 15, I thought I did that, but I didn't do that. I was just like, I wanted to please my parents, and
Yep.
I was like, I'm a Baha'i, and and you have to be really, really good, especially in our faith, as a parent, to be so detached to allow your child that process. And my parents weren't very good at it. They were just like, congratulations, and I'm like, yeah, here we are. And really it was in my 20s. Travis Van Winkle was a huge part of my journey, teaching him about the Baha'i faith, and us going to Haifa, Israel together, and me finally having my own real experience. And
Wait, sorry, you went to Haifa?
yeah, so the center of the Baha'i faith is in Haifa, Israel. That's the gardens. That's the Holy Land for us.
All right. I built a church there in Haifa through the church I was with in New York, Times Square Church. They did, and it was, there was the Drew Village, Druze.
I don't know.
We couldn't work with our shirts off because, and it was 100 degrees, and we were building all the rebar, but there was a sect of a religion that if they saw us with their shirts off, we would deeply offend them. And I would just remember like dying.
Well, it definitely wasn't the Baha'is.
They can work with their shirts off.
I'm sure we could work with our shirts off.
But at the time, Lebanon was being bombed, and it was like the sonic boom was waking us up. This was 1997, I think. So that was my experience of Haifa.
So Haifa is amazing.
Yeah, it was so beautiful there.
Do you remember the mountain and the gardens and the shrine? Do you have any memory of like that whole
is it
Mount
Carmel?
Carmel? So Mount Carmel is the Baha'i Holy Land.
Right, Kihilat Har Carmel, like the
whole mountain is where the Baha'i faith is.
Really?
Yeah, so the Baha'is own that mountain.
And so it started in like 1812,
1840s in Iran. In Iran.
And so how did Haifa, Israel become the center if it's from Iran?
It's quite a story, but BahauLah, who's the prophet founder of the Baha'i faith, was exiled throughout the Ottoman Empire. Nobody would dare kill him because he said who he was. He was the promised one. He was the return. He wrote all of the leaders of the world, from the popes to the queens to the kings, announcing who he was. He was imprisoned and essentially exiled with his family, forced to walk on horseback hundreds of miles in the snow through the mountains of Persia at the time. Eventually was exiled to the prison city of Akka, which is in Israel. It's actually right across from Haifa, and had a view of Mount Carmel from where he was in that prison city. He was in prison there for years and years and years, suffered terrible abuse, and eventually was released he was able to live in a house. He was a prisoner his whole life. But he I don't know, it's kind of how would you imprison Jesus today? You wouldn't dare execute him. God forbid he's telling the truth. And you kind of put him on a leash, and that's kind of what the government did. And he was able to move around, and he told Abdul Baha, which is his son, that's where he envisioned the shrine. That's where he envisioned the future of the Baha'i faith. And so his son set out to build it. The country of Israel gave it to the Baha'is. It's one of the only times that's ever happened. And
wow.
And an agreement, the Baha'is promised to never try to teach or convert Jews.
So conversion, and I was reading about your faith, conversion's not like a part of it, right? It's not, you don't have to necessarily convert.
No, there's no brownie points of like, you convert somebody, you're going to heaven or anything like that. Okay. It's much more when you love a restaurant, you want everybody to go there with you.
Right.
It's about understanding that the purpose of the Baha'i faith is literally to change the systems and structures of the world. And in order to find peace, we have to be thinking about our spiritual progress more so and before our material progress. And understanding that we are all one, we're all brothers and sisters. I mean, the things that the faith says about borders and war and justice, understanding that justice is a central theme and element in the faith. So all of these systems that are in place in the Baha'i faith are examples of what we believe will help the world achieve peace, an
Mhm.
everlasting peace. And so the purpose of sharing the faith then is to share it with, like I'm sharing it with you. And if it
Yeah.
resonates with you, great. Live by the principles without ever calling yourself a Baha'i. If you want to become a Baha'i, that's another process. And you would hopefully go on your own journey to learn for yourself and not just hear someone on a podcast and then say, I want to be that. You can't even give money to the Baha'i faith unless you're a Baha'i.
Is that right?
They will send it back to you.
Come on.
No, I'm
Well,
serious.
that I love the integrity of that. That is unheard of. Everybody will take your money. I'm like,
There's no clergy, and there's no proselytizing. People have tried because they love the faith so much. They wanted to help build and construct these temples, these mother temples that we have around the world, and Baha'is will send the money back.
wow.
Because the second you bring money and religion together, you have the Catholic Church. You have a man's ego. It's really beautiful. BahauLah basically was like understanding that our egos are so strong. You can't have that involved.
Interesting.
So the whole faith is set up for the removal of ego.
Yeah. Do you think that so you and Travis, I didn't mean to sidetrack you. I got excited.
No, it's all good, man.
I got excited about Carmel when you said, or Haifa.
No, it's good. And you painted a great picture. All these, women listening are going to picture you, shirtless in Haifa, or, some guard telling you to put your shirt back on.
Yeah, it never came up. I was like, I wish it had. So you and Travis went to Haifa together?
Yeah, I actually write about it in the book. We went to Haifa together. Travis was studying the faith as well, and I just had an incredible experience where I for the first time really submitted and detached and said, "All right, God, I don't know what I'm supposed to be. I don't know what I'm doing here. Please use me in whatever way I'm supposed to be used." There's a prayer in our faith that says, "Make of me a hollow reed." And I just said, "Make me a hollow reed. I just want to be of service. I don't know what I'm doing here. What you want me to do?" I was 25. And then that entire year was really the beginning of my spiritual journey. And I met Emily. I met my wife. Re-met her a full year from there. That was when we met and started dating.
Wow.
Yeah.
And then from that spiritual, like when you made the choice on your own to call yourself, or to, I guess that I had a very similar thing when I grew up born again Christian, but it was my parents' thing until I was in my 20s and traveling the world, and I'd made a decision on my own and started to discover what it was like for myself. That was to stand on my own. And I asked a similar question. I was like I wanted to be used in some way.
Yeah.
I find it fascinating. And Travis, Travis was on this podcast, I think a month ago, and he shared some of the things that he loved about it. And do you think that did that in your prayer to be used, a hollow reed, how soon after that did My Last Days begin? Because is My Last Days, I mean, other than your proposal to Emily, which is, by the way, everybody can, how do they find it if they search on YouTube? Is just the proposal?
I probably just type in our names or something.
Yeah. It's dude, that thing is absolutely incredible. And your TED Talk too.
That was ridiculous.
That was so. What's your thoughts on that right now when you look at it?
On the proposal?
Yeah.
Oh man, it's so sweet. It feels so young. It feels so innocent. It was before children and before success. I was broke, man. I was just a struggling documentary filmmaker, commercial director. But it's so sweet because you look at that and we had such a beautiful community. And to kind of answer your question, that entire community, all those people in that video were because I came back from that trip and had started to plant the tree of faith in my own heart and built this community of friends all through this thing we were doing called the Spiritual Talk, which was every Sunday night at my house. I was having people over to talk about life and to talk about death and to talk about God and to share differing beliefs and show that we all can get along. But it was rooted in the teachings of the Baha'i faith, which is where I invited Emily to. That's how we started dating. That's and all of those people in that video were all people that have become our closest friends through that spiritual talk, rooted in this foundational belief that we're all one, rooted in the Baha'i teachings. So to answer your question, like, it happened really fast, within a year, because I was just on fire and excited and full of love, and I was young, and we were all searching for something, and we just had these deep, open conversations. 120 people would show up in my living room every Sunday.
Wow.
And we did it for.
Did you film it? Did you record that and film some of it, or no?
No. We made like a little video one point just to show, because it was starting to go around the world, and people would like literally come to LA just to come to the spiritual talk. But it was just in my apartment that Travis was living with me at the time, and it was amazing. But it was just like, if you build it, they will come. That was kind of the idea, and that's how I realized, like, oh, this is one of the things I'm here for. And then it was shortly after that I had the idea for My Last Days, to answer your question.
And then you also did that other roundtable of conversations that was filmed. What was that one called? Where you would.
Is this Man Enough? Is this the first edition of Man Enough?
The first edition. So the first edition, was it called that then as well? No, it was.
Yeah. I did that right before the TED Talk in 2017.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
but that was years later. That was 6 years after we'd been married, and 7 years after I'd been to Israel.
How did the idea for My Last Days come together? Because it is so hard. It is one of the hardest things to watch, honestly. Like it's beautiful because it's a meditation on death, which is how we started this podcast with. And I love the juxtaposition that it's on the CW, like, and it's so well. So how did that idea come to you? Was it like in a dream, or how did you have the idea to do that?
No, I wish it was that cool.
Yeah, I know. You're like, I'm Paul McCartney.
No, there was there's a quote from BahauLah who says, "I have made death a messenger of joy for thee. Wherefore dost thou grieve?" And I always struggled with that. I always struggled with, like, how can death be joyful? And when you unpack that and you go back to what we were talking about earlier, understanding that we're in the womb and we're going to be born into a world that is so beautiful and so vastly different than this one. It's hard to imagine. I mean, I'm looking out at the mountains in Ojai. We live in Ojai now, and I'm just like, this world is so beautiful, but how could we imagine something more beautiful than this world, without time or space, without limits, without pain? The ability to just think it and go, not bound by the constraints of gravity and these types of things. Like, just imagining that world is so hard. But if you do, and you realize that, like, oh, I'm excited when I go to Hawaii with my family. I'm excited when I go on a trip. And you think, oh, that's how I'm supposed to be reframing and thinking about death, then it can be joyful, but it's only joyful if you pack right. If you're trying to pack, like, the refrigerator into your suitcase to take it with you, like, you don't need a refrigerator, because where you're going next already has a refrigerator. You don't need that. What are the things that I really need for my trip? And it made me start to think about, like, wow, what am I doing in my life to prepare for that? Because I had a lot of fear around death. How do I make it joyful? And so I set out to be around people that were closer than I was to it, to see if I could learn from them. And I was always really drawn to it early on in my, even I remember being 20 and having pretty amazing experiences, almost rushing towards family members who were dying instead of running away from them, and almost feeling like, oh wow, in another life I could have been a death doula, and just holding that space and being there for family members and helping them transition, and feeling very calm in those spaces when everybody else was kind of freaking out. And it was a very strange quality for a teenager, and yet also feeling so sure that there was another world we were going to, and yet also questioning and doubting it because the faith wasn't my own yet. It wasn't, like, planted in me. So my last days came about where I was just I was like thinking about my life and work, and I didn't want to act anymore. I wasn't really happy. I was like, no, I have more to give. I don't want to be just at the whim of this industry and just like feeling like I'm in a washing machine and doing, I'm like you, like just taking my shirt off every single job that I do and being hypersexualized with this strange double standard that we have.
Yeah. And you talk about that a lot in the book.
I'll talk about it in the book. So yeah, so I created it because I wanted to help myself and help others recognize that, like, okay, we have a choice to be happy right now. And we shouldn't have to wait until we're dying. That was the purpose. That was the reason. And it only ended up on the CW because I started working on the CW. I made the first season on YouTube for $4,000 an episode.
Wow.
And lost everything and gained everything.
And that's one of the beautiful things in the series is you say that, this is an appointment we all have. And then most of the people are so joyful, and, there's shots of you interacting with them, and they're on their last moments, and some would pass within weeks or days even of your conversation, and there was a joyfulness to them, and like that. It's not, the question was never like, why me, which was so inspiring. And I think we live in this culture where we complain if our Wi-Fi goes slow, when we're not being bombed like it's happening in Ukraine right now, or there's, why not us? Like we're in such a complainy, victimy, outraged world of voicing how our complaints, that when you see someone who's passing away with such dignity and grace, and I just think it's so cool and so important that you provided a platform for people to, because when you get that perspective of death, it's a lot harder to complain about your little things in your life when you're like, oh man, I have it so good.
Yes, but then you still complain.
Why? How do we lose perspective so quickly?
Because we're designed to. So one of the Arabic translations of human being is insan, which translates to they who forget. and right. I think it's a blessing and it's a protection, right? You have to rediscover and refine your way every day. That's the journey. And and also think about, like, trauma lives in our bodies, but thank God we forget about it. We would be incapacitated if we held with us every terrible experience we've ever had. And the same with the good. We have to rediscover those things for ourselves every day. So I can confidently say I have learned and been around so much. I have so much knowledge and information and spiritual wisdom inside of me that I forget every single day, because I'm human.
Yeah,
I'm a human being. And then the journey is bringing it all the way back to, when I really gained a lot of respect for you. The journey is then being willing, being man enough, being human enough to re-go on that journey and apologize when we mess up, because we knew better. Or if we didn't know better, we know better now. And refine that in marriage, in life with our kids. I apologized to my kids this morning for something. Because we're going to be imperfect, but that is the very thing that makes us perfect. I'm perfect, imperfect. We should never be striving for perfection. Striving, yes, but not holding ourselves to that place.
Oh yeah,
when
totally.
we fall short.
I think that men there's something so beautiful about I apologize to my son Oliver. Like a couple of times I remember where I just would go to him, like, I handled that like a total jerk, and I could have handled it like this way, and I'm really sorry for. And just the look in his eyes of respect, it's like the opposite of what people think. They think we have to be man and tough and have our kids apologize to us or something. It's like, but with Oliver, he was 7 throughout. Obviously he's 18 now, but just before he moved to Florida, there was a couple times when we were butting heads and I didn't handle myself in a way that I feel was appropriate. And I went to him and I'm like, look, I never had a 17-year-old before, and I handled that like a total jerk. Will you forgive me? And he always is like, no, Dad, you actually handled yourself right. I was being, and he almost always takes responsibility when I take full responsibility like that.
That's the cheat. That's the cheat code.
That's the cheat.
People don't, I write about this in the book too, but people don't
Yeah.
realize it. The power, like true power, comes from humility.
It does.
But we're taught the opposite. If you truly want to be a powerful man, then practice being a humble man.
Yeah.
It's quiet. It's not aggressive. And it unlocks and gives permission for others to then fall into their humility. But we don't think about it that way.
No.
And especially with parenting, because we think like, oh, we have so much to teach our kids, when in reality, they're the ones teaching us every day.
100%. It's that Khalil Gibran quote where we're just the bow that gets yanked back and bent, and the master's hand takes our children, who are the arrows of life's longing for itself. I mean, that's one of my favorite. Now, how different is, I know that's like Sufism, and I know there's the Bahai is not connected to Sufism in a way, or is it because there's a mysticism to it, or is there a little bit? No.
No, it's not connected. By the way, the prophet is actually based on Abdul-Baha, who's the son of BahauLah.
It's not.
So Khalil Gibran has got a chance to meet Abdul-Baha in 1912, 1913 in New York. In fact, he did a portrait of Abdul-Baha. So when you talk about the prophet coming in on the boat and all of that happened, that was Abdul-Baha. And if you look up the history of when Abdul-Baha journeyed from the east to the west to America, he was met by thousands of people. He was this white flowing robe and a turban and a long beard. And he is who we look at in the Baha'i faith as the perfect example of all of God's attributes manifest in a human being. So Khalil Gibran was very good friends with Juliet Thompson, who was a woman that was very close to Abdul-Baha Bahai, and they introduced the two.
Come on.
Yeah, super interesting. There's a great story about that, not to sidetrack you, but all of the Baha'is in New York, the high class Baha'is in New York at the time, and we're talking about, there was a lot of very influential Baha'is in the early 1900s. Phoebe Hearst was a Baha'i from San Francisco. They had pulled their money together to bring Abdul-Baha to the West, and they bought him a ticket for the Titanic.
Come on. Really?
And without any explanation, he sent the ticket back and he said, please use this money on those who can't afford to eat. And he took a shitty boat and he just got here later. Now, again, that's why he's called the mystery of God. There's countless stories of how Abdul-Baha would be preparing for someone, and he'd be saying, get a table ready, get food ready, and they'd be saying, what, why, who's coming over? And then sure enough, he would open the door, and 6 hours later, this person would come in who traveled for 3 days by train just to meet him. This stuff would happen all the time.
Yeah.
And the whole idea is, when we truly get in touch with our spiritual virtues, our spiritual powers, if you will, then we all become instruments and mysteries of God. So he got a chance to meet, Khalil Gibran got a chance to meet Abdul-Baha, painted a portrait of him, and many believe that the prophet is actually inspired by the time they spent together and his teachings.
No kidding. Well, that's here. I thought it was based in Sufism, but just when you say that when he returned the ticket to go feed those, to give food, those who need food and clothing and shelter, does that directly affect your impact? Because you guys have fed over 15,000 people through. You started a foundation connected to Wayfarer, right? That helps feed people here in.
Oh yeah, it's all from Abdul-Baha. Everything I do is from Abdul-Baha, and it's all. I mean, this is a man who was, again, he was imprisoned with his father throughout the course of his life, and before his father died, left the entire faith to him to build and set up the democratic structures that exist, that are in place now, to make sure that no clergy can be established. And then then the actual way to set this up was to live and be the example. And imagine before Christ died, before Muhammad dying, being very clear, writing in his own hand his will and testament, and leaving this all and saying, look to this person who is the embodiment of all of my virtues. So that's who Abdul Baha was. And so we're told as Baha'is to study his life and study the people that interacted with him. And because you can touch the history, you can look back 100 years and see the pictures of him in New York, him in LA, him visiting the Inglewood Cemetery for the first American Baha'i, the things that he did that were about the unification of races, his anti-racism work in the early 1900s, and taking one of the first African American believers after being invited to this governor's ball that were for whites only, and saying, I'm not going unless he comes with me, puts him to the right of him, brings him in, puts this black man to the right of him in a room full of white people, and never says a word, and just gives a speech on justice. Like, he was doing radical things in the early 1900s,
Wow.
including going down to the Bowery in New York City. Instead of going and meeting famous celebrities or politicians, he'd say, no, I'm busy. And he would go down and he would pass out coins to all of the homeless who were living on the street at the Bowery, which is kind of like the Skid Row of New York at the time. It was always about example. It was about doing the work. And so, yeah, it influences everything that I've
I love
done.
that. I mean, faith is action, right? You can say you're a believer, but the way you live your life and how much of your life is of service and committed to others, for me, is the telltale if somebody is a person of faith, not by what the words they say. You know, there's such
That's actually a Baha'i quote. You're speaking. That's the truth. Faith is, Abdul Baha says that faith is conscious knowledge and then the practice of good deeds.
right.
And he describes the three different kinds of faiths. All you need to know about the first two is one's just like, oh, I'm a Baha'i because my parents are. Culturally, right? A lot of Jews are Jewish culturally, but not practicing. Yeah. The second is like, oh, yeah, I agree with that. I'll go to church on Sunday. And the third is action. Mm-hmm. And the only way we are only allowed to be Baha'is to even take the title if we're acting, if it's action. So you're absolutely correct that it's all action. You have to know something and then do something. If you don't do something, that's not faith.
Right. Absolutely. It's just empty words and usually trying to make ourselves look good or look like we're,
especially today in social media.
Yeah. How does a person navigate? You know, I think about my 3-month-old. I think about obviously your kids, and then my son at 18. And it's like, when you and I grew up, I mean, we're a decade apart, almost. I think I'm 9 years.
Yeah,
old.
but I'm a little pissed that we don't look a decade apart. So whatever.
Yeah. Well, you should.
I'm gonna have to get a shout out to your dermatologist.
It's probably just the ring light here.
Yeah,
I shaved.
Sure.
If you shaved, you would look like you're 20. This is a good look for those who are listening. Justin's rocking a pretty serious. It's celery juice, says Timmy. I want to ask you this: how, just because I asked God and God told me to ask you this, how do you find time to be present to your family, to the kids, when you have two new movies that you're producing, you've just, and congrats on that, the success of 5 Feet Apart, and like 91 million being CBS's third highest grossing film. And then I'm sure Clouds, like that, when I saw it on Disney, like all the billboards for Clouds, I was like, that's Justin. I was like so excited and proud of you. And
oh, thanks, man.
And then very obviously you guys have these two other ones, the senior, and then you have the the paperback version of this, and you recut some stuff for middle school teenagers.
No, it's right? It's a whole new book. We have a whole new book for middle. Yeah, I wrote a middle grade book because I think to me it's more important than the big book.
What's it called?
I don't know if am I allowed to say what it's called?
I don't think I'm allowed you don't have to yet.
Only because I think they're going to do this whole thing around it. But
okay,
basically it's a play on Boys Will Be Boys. That's what I can tell you.
Cool.
And it's just teaching boys how to be human using the same personal experiences I used in the adult book, but actually go quite deeper because I had a lot more healing in between the adult book and the middle grade book. But to answer your question, I fail all the time. I struggle with it. There is no right answer. I don't believe there is such thing as balance. I think that there is a daily reckoning and almost a moment by moment accounting that needs to take place to put things into perspective of what matters to you most. And there are going to be seasons where you have to be hyper focused on various things. If your purpose is tied to it, if your service is tied to it, I've always believed that I could do everything, and I realized that I couldn't. I've fallen and crashed and burned very hard. I did way too much. I've done way too many things over the last 7 years. Which is why I'm going gray at 38 a little bit.
That's why you're pumping the brakes now. You're like, now I'm going to slow down.
Why I'm pumping the brakes, because I realized that a lot of my drive for success was really just a trauma response and a deep desire for little Justin to be seen as good and worthy and loved. And as I'm on a journey learning that he already is, I'm realizing I can do much less. And I think that it's going to require a collective healing to really pump the brakes for a lot of us, not just men, but women. I mean, we're talking about a patriarchal society built on this idea that if we're not producing, we're not enough.
Yeah.
We have to look at that and heal. And we're all, it's built into all of us. Our worth is tied to productivity. If we're not doing, what are we? When in reality, like, doing nothing sometimes is the best thing we could ever do. You talked about Khalil Gibran and the arrow. Well, you have to shoot an arrow back for it to go forward. That's what meditation is, right? So I'm learning, and it's a daily negotiation, honestly. Sometimes I look into the eyes of my kids and I'm like, I know I have a deadline, but I'm not going to do it. I'm going to be with my kids today. Or, I've turned down, I was going to make a movie last summer, a fairly big movie for a studio. And I just decided I didn't want to. I just moved to the country and I was with my family and we're building a house. And I'm like, I don't want to go be gone for 4 months. What am I going to have to show for it? Another movie? Okay. At the end of my life, I pray to God no one's reading my resume. Certainly no one's going to be watching the movie when I'm, not here anymore. Maybe to remember me, but no, I would much rather have my memories be in the bodies and the souls of my children. So it's a negotiation. It's a balance. Sometimes I can get caught up in it because, again, it feels very good to have success and to make money, and that illusion of power feels beautiful at times, but it's not actually what matters. And the deeper I go into my own healing work, the more I realize that, and the more that I take things off my plate. So that's what I've been doing, is little by little taking things off my plate, and allowing my spine, my emotional spine as well, to decompress.
You just said you're healing journey. Do you feel like you'll ever be healed enough? Like, and I know it's a bit of a
healed enough, right?
No, but like, is there an end to the healing, or is it just something that, like you said, we keep forgetting and we remember that maybe we're perfect, whole, and complete anyway? Like, I don't know. What do you think?
I think healing is like learning. And if you asked me if there's an end to learning, I'd say no.
Right.
So long as there is a world and human beings, there will be healing that has to happen. Also, healing is in real time. Healing is a moment to moment thing, just like time management. There's times where we have to take a pause and take an inhale to heal the shit that came out on the exhale. Totally. It's every day.
I loved your response, because the first thing you said was, I mess up at this all the time. And your humility, you can write a book like this, but actually spending time with you and feeling your heart and feeling your humility and your spirit, dude, it's actually, it's an honor. It's an honor to
Thanks, man.
to have you answer these questions so authentically. And I know it's been a journey. I mean, like, you're being sexualized, and it's not, it's a quite a journey to, when you're a piece of meat, to then go, oh, like, how do I nurture all those things that aren't, buttering my bread? Like, how do I nurture all those parts of myself that I know are good for my soul and my family? And you talk about that quite a bit, about the shirt off guy, and like, it's quite candid. It's so, my son listened to your book.
I'm sure you can relate. I'm sure you can relate to that, man.
Totally. The first part of I mean, and even on, there's always this feeling of making sure I'm in good enough shape that if the director's like, hey, this is the scene where you I'm like, all right, I'm there. But my son, I just was going to say, my son's been listening to this.
Oh, that's awesome.
He only has an hour left on on the Audible. Cause like you actually speaking it, for me, I'm an auditory learner.
Yeah.
But
too.
like, I did Matthew McConaughey's book and also Will Smith's book and your book. Those are the three kind of actor, and yours is right on par with those, dude. Like, in terms of
That's very kind of you. But Matthew McConaughey made me super insecure when I listened to his audiobook. On the way to doing my sessions, I was listening to his audiobook. And I'm like, this guy is so talented.
yeah, but you know what?
But he's a story. But his book's totally different. It's a storyteller. But I told him that too, because I had him on my podcast, and I told him, I'm like, Matt, I should have never listened to your audiobook going to my sessions.
Yeah.
You're so good.
He's such a great story. He's such a great storyteller.
So but thank you. I appreciate the compliment.
But there's so many levels of depth to your audiobook too, with that you can actually hear it in your voice when you're actually, that there's a lot more value from my perspective in your book.
I cry a lot. I cry a lot in the audiobook.
Right. And no shade to Will or to those. They're all highly entertaining. But lastly here, man, I just want to respect, within the ballpark of the realm of time, what scares you, man? Like, you seem to be like, you've developed a ninja approach to this stuff. If you're meditating on death, and death is the thing that, other than Matthew McConaughey's delivery of his book, what are you afraid? Man. What are you most afraid of?
I am most afraid of waiting until it's too late to do the work. I'm most afraid of dying and having packed the wrong suitcase.
Okay. And what is the work? Packing the right stuff in the suitcase?
The work is, again, if what I need for a bodiless existence where my soul is free from this birdcage is all the virtues of the world, it's choosing to pack the things that I needed for this world and not for that one. It's throwing money and TV and fame and houses and all of that in the suitcase and neglecting the stuff that actually matters, that's a barrier to. It's getting to wherever we go next and having God show me what I could have been, but not what I could have been in terms of an influence or success, what I could have been in terms of a human being through service with an impact on the world, helping us progress towards oneness.
And if we're always forgetting, we're always remembering, what are something you do to allow yourself to remember to come back to packing the right suitcase, for the right journey?
Well, it's a little bit different for me because I am a Bahai, and literally BahauLah gives us 6 things that we're supposed to do every day for that reason.
Can you quickly list them off?
Yeah. So we have something called obligatory prayer, which is every day there's an obligatory prayer. Muslims, as an example, pray 6 times a day. The Baha'is are told we need to pray once a day. At least. And so there are prayers that you can say once a day, and that's kind of like throwing up the tether, right? Being like connecting yourself. Upon waking up in the morning, we can repeat. There's this phrase, Alawapa, which is the shortest prayer in existence. You can say that 95 times. It's almost like a meditation. We have to, or we're asked to, at the end of each night, take ourselves to account. There's a quote. This is perfect for this. You want to talk about death. BahauLah says, bring yourself to account, for thou art summoned to a reckoning. For death unheralded shall come upon thee, and you shall be called to give account for your deeds. So it's like this death unheralded is coming. It's coming. And we're going to be asked to give account for our deeds. And what we're supposed to do every single night before we go to bed, I don't do this every night, but I do this, is look at our day. Look at our day, and we're supposed to ask ourselves, what did we do this day? What did we do over the course of the day that would be pleasing to God? What are the virtues that I practiced or acquired that I can put in that suitcase? And then we ask for strength to do more the next day. And then we're supposed to look at the things that maybe we didn't do so well, right? What can we take out of the suitcase? I don't need that 60-inch TV in the suitcase. I don't need it. Let's take it out. And ask for strength to correct them the next day. It's literally, God says to us, you're going to forget. You have the memories of a goldfish.
Yeah.
Here are some things that you can do. Meditation, super important. That's really what prayer is. And then right now, once a year, we fast. So there's a period of fasting. So right now it's the Bahai fast. So I haven't had food or drink since before sunrise. And I won't have food or drink until sun sets. And we do that for 19 days every single year. It's a physical fast for spiritual purposes. We're detaching. We're literally detaching from our carnal desires. So during the day, like, I'm not acting on my carnal desires. I'm not having sex with my wife. I'm not eating. I'm not drinking the things that my body might tell me I want. Instead, I'm replacing those things with spiritual conversations like this, with prayer. And then at nighttime, I break the fast and I get ready for the next day. It's a month of purification. And we do that every year to help us remember, because we forget. We forget and we forget.
I think I have the name of this conversation, like, is definitely around how do you remind yourself to remember, like with Justin Baldoni. Like, it's such a beautiful, you could create like a Bahai journal, and those 6 tenets, like not just Bahai, but the whole world could really benefit from. And because those sound like,
but it's in every religion. It's honestly in every, I mean, it's in Islam, like at the root of Christianity, like Christ asked us to do these things. Like every religion has a version of this, and the Baha'i faith, BahauLah, is just very clear. Like, these are the things that you do because this is how you strengthen that relationship with me. This is how you strengthen it. And we can all have the free will to do it or not. And a lot of us don't do it.
Right.
And then sometimes we don't do it and we feel so much shame that keeps us from doing it. When in reality, when you have your child and your child messes up, all you want is for him to come back. All you want is for Oliver to come back to you and say, oh, I messed up, Dad, I'm sorry. And you're going to be there with open arms, loving him, not scolding him or punishing him or admonishing him for his work, for what he did. And I believe God's the same way. The all compassionate, the all merciful.
That's a God that I want to believe in right there. And that's that, because to be motivated, Justin, by love rather than motivated by fear, I feel is what my mission in life is, to remind people of the power, especially with parenting and relationships, is just how, and that relationship with God, my relationship with God changed so much when I realized I was motivated from fear. I was fear of punishment, fear I wasn't enough. Fear of the eternal torment. And then once it shifted for me on a motorbike in India, where I put my son's picture on my gas tank, and we were in the Himalayas by Tibet. And every time I looked at my son, I would relax into love. But there was so much fear around me that it really gave me this powerful distinction between fear and love. And when I was afraid, I was rigid and stiff on my motorbike. And when I looked at my son, I would relax and I would be intuitive and creative. And as a rider, I was so safe when I was in love. But when I was in fear, I was stupid and rigid and afraid. It was like, and it became—
You just described masculinity, by the way.
How so?
We're afraid. We just don't know it. That's why we're rigid.
Ooh.
But there's a quote in the Baha'i writings, again, I love that this is what you care about. Abdul Baha says that love is a light that never dwelleth in a heart possessed by fear.
Say that again.
Love is a light that never dwelleth in a heart possessed by fear. And it's just but you're right on. You're right on. And especially, I know you were raised a born again Christian. A lot of my born again Christians friends really are struggling because the way that their faith was taught to them was fire and brimstone, which is not the Bible.
No,
it's not the Bible.
No.
If you look at Jesus, you want to talk about actions. Jesus was a radically progressive, all-loving human being that like just loved the shit out of everybody.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter what you did to him, what you said to him, who it was.
Mm.
He spent his time with the meek, with the ungodly, if you will.
Yeah, the prostitutes
and that's where the love was. That's where he showed it. And those people didn't go to hell. You know,
right.
He wouldn't have spent his time there if he thought that they were damned or doomed. And he certainly wasn't just trying to save them. He was loving them.
That's right. That's right.
Which is the root of all religion is love. All of it.
Mm.
We screw it up. Man screws it up. Ego screws it up.
It's so true. Well, I think we should end it there, but man, this has been one of my favorite conversations, not just on my podcast, but like in my life, dude. There's something going on. There's something radically beautiful going on right now in this experience that I'm having, and that you've opened up a couple areas of thought and areas of my heart feels like it's expanding in a really powerful way. So I just want to thank you for that.
Oh, I love it, man. And if you ever want to talk about the Baha'i faith, man, come on over. The grass is green.
That's the name of this podcast. The grass.
That's why I said it. That's why I said it. I was just trying to bring it all the way back to you.
That was the button. The grass is greener where you water it.
I didn't want to say greener. I just want to say the grass is green because
the grass is green. But that's why I wanted you on, because the grass is greener is from the quote, the grass is greener where you water it.
Yeah.
And you're one of those people that is watering your own lawn, and you're nurturing the things you love. You're not
trying.
And that's, desiring things that are on the other side or where the grass is greener. It's never that way. It's grass is greener where you water it, where you nurture it. So where do people find you and follow you? And I know you have a couple projects that with your book.
Oh, it's all good. They follow wherever, I don't know,
wherever,
social media, wherever
they'll find you.
People know. Social media, all that stuff on Paul's page. You can find me.
Yeah. I'll tag you. I really want people to check out your TED Talk, because and the proposal that you proposed to Emily is so good. And of course, the end of My Last Days, because if you want to, I really understand the heart of this guy and that meditation with death and looking at death in a way as a key to joy. It's just
the scariest thing we could ever do.
Mm-hmm.
The scariest thing we could ever do.
Mm. Thank you. Thank you,
man. Thank you for having me. It was so sweet to be here with you.
You too.
Yeah.
All right. We'll talk soon.
All right.
Bye.
Hey, see you later. Bye, everybody who was listening. Nice to meet you all.
Thanks, brother.
See you, man.
Well, I sure hope that you enjoyed that conversation as much as I did. I did not expect for us to talk about his faith in the way that we did, for as long as we did, for as much as we did, but I could tell that it was really important. And it's impossible to actually understand who Justin is outside of that, because it's what I heard from what he shared is everything is motivated by his service and his give back and him being a hollow reed and being the bow that the archer is pulling back. I had no idea of that connection of Khalil Gibran and the Baha'i faith and Abdullah, but I hope you enjoyed that. It made me really think about what suitcase unpacking, the material stuff or the spiritual stuff, and how easy it is to forget and how normal it is to forget. And it reminded me and inspired me to create some anchors to help me remember about what's important. speaking of, I'm going to go kiss on my little 3-month-old's face right now. And I just want to thank you for being here, for subscribing and rating and reviewing and all that good stuff. My heart is full. I'm in deep gratitude to the message and the man that Justin is. And my prayer also is that in some way you've been inspired to look at your life and to look at the way that you move through life, and not to value or judge yourself on if you're spiritual enough. There's so many traps laid around, but just to remember who you are, and remember the things that are important. And I think this conversation has really helped me to remember, and to inspired me to create some new ways to anchor and to remind myself to remember of the important things in life. And thanks so much for being here. Until I see you next time on The Grass is Greener with Paul Greene, remember to water your own grass. The grass is not greener on the other side. To nurture the things you love. And remember, please, to be kind and gentle and tender and loving towards yourself in your thoughts on purpose. And please enjoy yourself. And of course, if you can have a look at the show notes, there's a link to some of the sponsors of this show. And you can use my code. That always helps with the show and helps with some of the folks sponsoring as well. And it makes a difference. So thank you so much. Until next time, until soon. Bye-bye.